What I wanted to mention was Jane Gentry and Richard Will say you guys won a line in the Chicago draft.
Jet planes and swimming pools.
Yeah, that our opponents want to help the rich pay for bigger swimming pools and faster private jets.
Yeah.
Hit him hard.
Well, we are hitting them hard, but I'm not going to use the line.
Why not?
Henry, last fall, every time your boss got on the stump and said, it's time for the rich to pay their fair share, I hid under a couch and changed my name.
This is from The West Wing, a TV show routinely labeled as an idealistic liberal fantasy land. In the Trump era, both the Democratic Party and their voters have returned to the show, using it on the campaign trail, honoring it at the White House, and watching the show as an escape from news about the construction of American concentration camps, a US-funded genocide in Gaza, the fire sale that has become the federal government, and Trump's recently launched gold-plated phone. Wait, does Trump really have a picture of himself as the background on his phone? Yeah, escape sounds pretty good right about now. Let's go back to the West Wing, yeah!
I left Gage Whitney making $400,000 a year, which means I paid 27 times the national average in income tax. I paid my fair share, and the fair share of 26 other people. But I don't get 27 votes on election day. The fire department doesn't come to my house 27 times faster, and the water doesn't come out of my faucet 27 times hotter. The top 1% of wage earners of this country pay for 22% of this country. Let's not call them names while they're doing it.
That's strange. I thought I was going to be escaping rich elites telling me that they deserve to run the country because they make the most money. When West Wing fans talk about how much they wish they lived in the world of the show, they don't mean that the show dreamt of a future where people can afford healthcare or a house. What they usually mean is that they wish the president wasn't crass and rude and openly racist. And while that would be nice, I think that the focus on Trump's unprofessional behavior ignores just why he's been able to build out a political base and why huge swaths of America were primed for his anti-establishment message and aesthetic. In 2024, many were absolutely bamboozled when labor unions and working class voters lined up behind Trump. Why would they vote for a guy who wants to destroy Social Security and Medicare? Why would they vote against their own interests? Don't they even know what a tariff is? No, the answer is nobody knew what a tariff was. We're less a country of fact and policy and more a country of vibes. So even though Trump's policies explicitly hurt the working class while providing massive tax cuts to billionaires, it was his framing around issues of the economy that really resonated with people, both in 2024 and in 2016.
The political establishment has brought about the destruction of our factories and our jobs as they flee to Mexico, China, and other countries all around the world. Every single auto worker, union and non-union, should be voting for Donald Trump because we're going to bring back car manufacturing and we're going to bring it back fast.
Today, wealth inequality is through the roof. Many of us seriously doubt that we'll ever own a home, the climate catastrophe is already here, and we have the most unaffordable healthcare in the entire world. Of course, Trump doesn't actually want to do anything about the system that created these outcomes. It's worked out pretty well for him so far, but he was able to harness that energy and aim it towards immigrants and minorities. That's because at the same time, Democrats have grown increasingly dismissive of the concerns of the people they claim to represent, from the working class voters in the beginning of this video to women.
Talking about the women, the voters, continuing their unbroken streak. The biggest nonsense issue in the campaign will belong to the women.
To racial minorities they portray as unreasonable roadblocks.
You think a few black millionaires justifies a multi-billion-dollar boondoggle?
Well, as long as there's a Congress, there are going to be multi-billion-dollar boondoggles. We'd just like to share in them a little bit, please.
To environmentalists they portray as silly children.
Many, if not most, environmentalists are absolutists.
Well, then they can grow up, Sam.
And all while cozying up to the business class, explicitly screwing them over.
And I hope you'll make it clear to your people that this has nothing to do with diluting our position or cozying up to Republicans.
No, why would they think that?
Welcome to The Worst Wing, a mini-series about trying to understand where the American liberal movement went wrong through the lens of the West Wing. So far, we've talked about how the West Wing helped sell bloodthirsty invasions of both foreign countries and of our own civil liberties to its liberal audience. And we talked about how the show glorified an attitude of compromise for the sake of compromise.
I really don't care who's right, who's wrong. We're both right. We're both wrong. Let's have two parties.
But I think that this has all been dancing around the real motivating factor for everything. The ideology that has had a stranglehold over American politics for the past 50 plus years. Neoliberalism. You've probably heard this word before, but what the heck does it mean? Well, here's political scientist Corey Robin.
For the most part, I think it's fair to say that neoliberalism really is a movement of the right. It starts on the right, and it reaches its culmination in the 1970s and the 1980s with the election of Margaret Thatcher, the election of Ronald Reagan. And the idea was that the New Deal, the bureaucracy has gotten too, sclerotic, too heavy, too slow. We need to start importing some of the ideas that we see in the free marketplace to bring to bear.
Sounds a lot like Doge.
It's not unlike that.
We'll get into more depth on this later, but if you want all of the gory details, Corey and I had a really awesome conversation about it that you can find over on patreon.com/skipintro with all sorts of other interviews and bonus material. You should consider becoming a patron today. I swear to God, I'm going to be doing more propaganda stuff after this video series, but this is also very important. Please do not leave me. I know that the views have been down. Patreon.com/skipintro. It's how I pay the bills. Today, following the 2024 election loss in a Trump administration every bit as bad as we had feared, those of us on the left find ourselves at a crossroads. What should be our rallying cry? On the one hand, Bernie Sanders and AOC have drawn thousands to relatively rural areas like Nampa, Idaho, and Altoona, Wisconsin on their Fighting Oligarchy tour, explicitly tapping into a similar populist energy as Trump, but turning it against the billionaires running the country.
And instead of giving tax breaks to billionaires, which is what Trump wants, our demand is that when the rich have never had it so good, they're going to start paying their fair share of taxes.
Meanwhile, others are rallying under the abundance agenda, named after a new book from opinion writers Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson. It's a vision for a Democratic Party that gets stuff done, freeing government from barriers that stop it from building things like zoning requirements and environmental regulations. Wait, really?
A lot of elected officials like him, a lot of journalists like him, and so this book has kind of shot up to the top. And so elected officials looking for a message, looking for a way forward, I think can gravitate to it because it kind of provides this, one easy fix. What if we didn't need to upset anybody?
That's Henry Burke, a senior researcher at the Revolving Door Project who's done a lot of reporting on the abundance movement. We'll be checking in with him later to talk about this war for the Democratic Party's soul. You can also watch our full conversation on patreon.com/ You know what? I already begged. I'm not gonna do it again. Have some pride. I think the abundance versus oligarchy fight is the newest version of this conflict between moderates and progressives in the Democratic Party, and one I think that we can learn a lot about through studying The West Wing, even though it's 25 years old. Before we get into it, I just want to take a minute to acknowledge that this is less of an immediate problem than the harm currently being caused by the Trump regime. But I also think it's crucial to understand how we got here. That part of the reason why so many working class and anti-system people voted for Trump is because this system, it's not working. So let's look at how the West Wing both reflects and shapes this conversation of moderate versus progressive, the neoliberal policies that the show promotes, and figure out what the path forward should be. In episode 1 of this series, we talked about how the West Wing has a weakness for the moderate Republican, but we didn't really discuss the flip side of this dynamic, which is the West Wing's absolute contempt for the left, which, in the world of the show, simply means people who are women, poor, or black. Let's start with women, the largest of these groups.
If men were the only voters, the GOP would be the left-wing party. Women are going to be 60% of your vote. Don't you think they should make up 40% of the campaign staff?
This is Amy Gardner, a lobbyist for various women's advocacy groups, and she often serves as a mouthpiece for hot-button issues like abortion access or paid family leave. She butts heads with Josh more than anyone else, and the show portrays her as an uncompromising and unreasonable nag.
She seems pretty irate. Amy Gardner's always irate about something. I wouldn't give it a lot of thought.
Whenever she asks the president to stand up for women's rights, Josh is there to say no, blurring the lines between just general prickishness and workplace sexual harassment.
Let me tell you why this is a dangerous area. Because I can't make decisions based on the fact that I like your smooth skin.
Of course, the show makes this all a bit of fun sexual tension between two hot co-workers. You see, Amy is turned on by Josh's negging because the show was written by men who never spoke to women.
Don't you want to kill him when he says things like that?
My problem is I want to jump him when he says things like that.
And what does Josh see in Amy? Well, it's not her principled stance on women's rights, that's for sure. It's got a lot more to do with her feet, her toes. Amy and the women she represents are often dismissed when they try to get the administration to address their issues. In season 3, Amy and Josh clash because the White House is trying to pass a welfare reauthorization bill that has some compromises in it that her organization isn't stoked about. Basically, the bill will provide more support to married women than unmarried women, theoretically incentivizing marriage, but really just punishing single mothers and making them financially reliant on male breadwinners. Amy pressures Democrats to oppose it, but rather than actually try to renegotiate the bill, Josh just goes over her head and gets her fired by bribing her boss with a position on the president's re-election campaign.
You did all right, okay?
I bought her boss.
Yeah, that's how you had to win this one. You think her job's really in jeopardy?
No, she'll lose it for sure.
What's crazy is that they're actually dating when he gets her fired for doing her job. Take notes, pickup artist. That's how you neg a lady. Next time you see a hot girl in the bar, find her boss and get her fired so that she has to marry you in order to get access to welfare. It's foolproof. When Amy and Josh debrief later, he berates her for having forced him to get her fired. You know, why did she have to be so annoying about this whole thing? Why can't these women see that there are so many other good things in this bill? Why are they so focused on pushing for more? Don't they see the other side is way worse?
And I congratulate you for punishing poor women as a symbol of the strength of mainstream values.
That's not what we did. Do you not consider it relevant that it would be worse with Rob Ritchie in the White House? Why is that not part of the equation?
The hallelujah music is kind of distracting here, but it's because they just killed a cop. It was one of my favorite scenes in the entire series. Repeatedly, the show treats women's rights issues as a nuisance. In a multi-episode arc in season 3, the FDA is set to announce that they're approving mifepristone.
What's mifepristone?
A pill that'll abort a pregnancy up to 49 days.
Mifepristone is RU486?
Yes.
And the FDA is approving it?
Yes.
Hallelujah!
While Donna celebrates, the show's entire focus is how actually this is really annoying, because Bartlett was supposed to announce his re-election campaign that same day, and you just gotta have your priorities in check.
You didn't think I'd be for it?
Of course you're for it. I'm for it, the president's for it, everybody's for it, just not on Monday.
Why not?
A, it'll get folded into our news cycle when we want it to ourselves. B, it'll give the pro-lifers something to scream about. And C, it'll look like the campaign screwed up, so the press will write a process story instead of writing about our issues.
What, isn't this one of our issues?
Not on Monday.
I think it's hard to watch this scene without thinking about the Dobbs decision that has repealed the right to abortion, and how Democrat after Democrat promised to codify Roe v. Wade into law, but never made it a priority. And this exact drug, mifepristone, is the next frontier in the legal assault over reproductive health. We can see this dismissal again when Bartlett's own wife confronts him on his terrible record on women's rights.
You put a guy on the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals who called sexual harassment a flight of fancy for the overindulged. Got child care subsidies and equal pay got pocket vetoed, and abstinence only and teacher funding initiatives.
He doesn't decide to recommit himself to that effort. He just tells her to get over it because politics is messy and, you can't get everything that you want.
German thinker Max Weber said that politics is the slow boring of hard boards. You know what that means?
I like how you think patronizing me is going to make me feel better. It's sweet.
It means that change comes in excruciating increments by those who want it.
Yeah, Abby, have you ever considered that delivering on women's rights is hard? Give him a break. He's only the most powerful man in the history of the world. What, you want him to confirm judges who think sexual harassment is a crime? You want him to not pocket veto equal pay initiatives? Ugh, women, all they do is nag, nag, nag.
That's what you have to say.
Yes.
All right, it's pretty good.
Yet, despite dismissing them at every turn, the Bartlett administration feels very entitled to the votes of those same women. In the final season, Matt Santos runs as a moderate on abortion access, and his campaign is absolutely flabbergasted when pro-choice groups won't automatically endorse them.
We don't want to make Santos the baby-killing candidate, if you'll excuse my
I'm thinking
expression.
of endorsing Vinnick.
We're the pro-choice party.
You don't sound like it.
The show feels similarly entitled to the support of black voters, despite constantly clashing with the Congressional Black Caucus. In season 4, the administration nominates a black man named Cornell Rooker for Attorney General, but there's one little snag. He believes racial profiling is good.
Reporter said that he liked Rooker's position on racial profiling.
That's strange.
No, it's not. We found the transcript. I'm not saying it should be active policy, but there is no question in my mind that in certain situations, racial profiling can be helpful to
Law enforcement?
Yeah, the show loves to do this thing, where they debate some racial issue, but make the racially colorblind argument come from a person of color. Like when they have a black woman make the case that the Civil War wasn't actually about slavery at all.
You're gonna lecture me on equal rights?
How does a state that fought for slavery have the gall to claim ownership in a document
First, Josh, the war wasn't just about slavery, it was about industry.
She's right. It was about industry. The slavery industry. Or this episode, where a 12-year-old unarmed black kid is murdered by the police.
It was going to be a tough crowd even before this happened. Black communities wondering how we got a Latino nominee before we got an African-American nominee. There's always been tension between the two communities, and now a cop named Martinez guns down one of their kids.
Rather than use this storyline to tackle issues of police brutality or white supremacy in that institution, the show just makes it a Hispanic versus black thing. Because the cop who shot him, he's Hispanic.
I don't see why the African-American community doesn't like the idea of a Latino president.
A little black-brown friction in the hood, if you haven't noticed.
At the end of the episode, Matt Santos, our Hispanic candidate, gives a speech that would fill up a white moderate bingo card.
I blame the kid, he stole a car. I blame the parents. Why couldn't they teach him better? I remember as a young man listening on the radio to Dr. King in 1968.
We must know that we have made some progress.
And then at the end, the black congregation stands up and cheers for him while the camera lingers on him holding hands with his white wife. We've just come so far. It used to be that black kids were killed by white cops and a white politician would tell them to get over it. Now they can be killed by white or Latino cops, and a president of color will tell them to get over it. America truly is a melting pot. None of this is particularly surprising when you learn about the background of the West Wing either. It was publicly criticized by the NAACP for not having a single character of color in its ensemble cast. Now, to address these criticisms, the third episode saw the introduction of Charlie, played by Dule Hill. Although it always felt a little strange to me that the only black character in the main cast is basically a glorified butler. Just as with women, the West Wing portrays black people as an interest group trying to push them towards more radical policies that just go too far, you know, like affirmative action.
After my father fought in Korea, he became what this government begs every college graduate to become. He became a teacher, and he raised a family on a teacher's salary, and he paid his taxes and always crossed at the green. And any time there was an opportunity for career advancement, it took him an extra 5 years because invariably there was a less qualified black woman in the picture. So
the show repeatedly prioritizes catering to moderates and independent voters over delivering results to people who do actually vote for them, all while admitting that their candidates can only win elections off the backs of black and female voters that they hate.
We need 90% of black voters. We've got 81. 12% of African Americans undecided in this race. The black votes never had undecideds.
Hey, I'm not screwing around. The women's vote isn't just half your constituency, it's the entire margin of victory.
Who else are you gonna vote for?
So let me get this straight. You need them to win, but anytime you have to address their issues, it's an annoyance. Yeah, I can't figure out why people don't like the Democrats at all. I'm stumped. This strikes me as remarkably similar to something we talked about in my last Jon Stewart video, the Democratic Party's approach to the 2024 election, with Kamala Harris cozying up to Bush and Reagan officials like real-life supervillain Dick Cheney, throwing trans rights under the bus, and promising to crack down on the border, all while ignoring and dismissing the demands of the left, who wanted her to oppose Israel's genocide in Gaza, champion Medicare for all, and push for bold climate action, not drilling for more oil. The retort the left was often met with was, well, who are you gonna vote for then? And this vibe is all over the West Wing. In another episode, the Santos campaign is demanding teacher union endorsements while they are actively trying to end teacher tenure.
We can raise pay and raise standards at the same time, and it'll stop something more drastic, more punitive.
Than ending teacher tenure?
Than doing it with nothing in return, which will be Vinnick's tack when he whips Russell in the fall.
You can see it in this episode where Josh physically fights Toby for proposing a progressive healthcare plan that pushes his candidate further to the left.
Now, every viable candidate has to waste airtime on why they do or don't support socialized medicine.
There's a profit-generating industry leeching the life out of this country's healthcare. You got something better you want to talk about?
Dragging the entire field to the left.
Good!
Ironically, Toby did the exact same thing to someone earlier in the series.
Come at us from the left, and I'm gonna own your ass.
These scenes all imply some kind of entitlement to the votes of the left, that the Democratic Party has no need to actually deliver results to those groups because they can't go anywhere else anyway.
They talk about the moderate voter, which sounds like some sort of swing voter who's out there, who's just your ordinary Joe. You know, and Joe Manchin is supposed to somehow stand in for that person, even though he's from an extraordinarily elite family and
owns the entire coal market.
Yeah. So there is this weird disjunction that, you know, on the one hand, we want to reach out to that, you know, ordinary person. And on the other hand, we look to, you know, who is the ordinary person whisperer? It's inevitably some extraordinarily elite white man.
But independent voters...
Please say white men instead of independent voters.
And at the same time, the West Wing clearly wants to take credit for the long history of those on the left who have pushed the United States into the future.
Liberals got women the right to vote. Liberals got African Americans the right to vote. Liberals created Social Security and lifted millions of elderly people out of poverty. Liberals ended segregation. Liberals passed the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act. Liberals created Medicare.
But it's also clear to me that the liberals on the West Wing would have been completely unwilling to champion any of those causes because they weren't popular at the time. The civil rights movement was wildly unpopular in the early 60s. And despite tons of public opposition, President Lyndon B. Johnson fought for and passed the Civil Rights Act of 1964. He didn't wait for it to poll well. Okay, so we can clearly see that Democrats have long ignored the minority groups and those on the left, you know, their base, in favor of reaching out to the middle. But where did that come from? How do we go from a party that pushed through civil rights legislation, the Great Society, Medicare, Medicaid, and the New Deal to this?
It's a good news, bad news thing. Under the new formula, poverty is up 2%. It was anyone under 17,524 before. Now it's 20,000.
What does that shake out to?
4 million new poor people.
4 million?
Yeah, obviously that's the bad news.
Yeah?
The good news is that more people will be eligible for benefits.
And taxpayers are nuts about that.
This is from a season 3 episode where there's a new calculation of poverty that ends up qualifying way more people for benefits. This is objectively a good thing, but for the Bartlett administration, this is a problem because it makes them look bad, even though it would explicitly help the people that they say they want to help.
Wouldn't we have a better chance of getting reelected if we could say there are 4 million fewer poor people? Hang on. Wait, I am an expert.
Well, I think we'd have a better chance of getting reelected if there actually were 4 million fewer poor people.
I think this is a pretty good example of how the West Wing thinks about the working class in general. Since everyone in the administration went to some Ivy League school and left high-paying jobs in things like corporate law or public relations, they're pretty separated from normal people. To them, economic concerns are largely abstract, numbers to be moved around on a spreadsheet.
You know about the new OMB definitions?
I know they're coming out. What's it gonna look like?
That depends. You want more poor people or fewer poor people?
Fewer poor people.
You got it.
This perspective is pretty much baked into the show as well. Bartlett, before becoming president, was a Nobel Prize-winning economist, which actually kind of makes him a lot like Donald Trump. Not because Trump is some kind of great businessman, but because reality TV star is exactly as serious a job as economist. And because Bartlett is an economist, his primary goal is to grow the economy, to raise that GDP, sometimes at the expense of the working people who voted for him in the first place.
Hey, listen. Any economic advancement involves what Schumpeter called creative destruction.
Why? Because that word destruction will really mollify our critics.
Free trade creates jobs.
Selling our products to the world
creates better, higher paying jobs. It's got to be that simple or we lose the argument.
Anybody have any crayons so I can color in my PhD?
This is all part of the ideology of neoliberalism, that the free market of capitalism can generate the maximum amount of wealth, and that a rising tide will lift all boats.
So allow huge portions of wealth to be generated by a dynamic, robust, capitalist, free market society, and then tax so that you can let's say, get more education to people who don't have a lot of education. Do job training to give people who don't have skills, that sort of thing. As you can see, it has a lot to do with things like what is called human capital. That the reason why people are poor is because they lack not money, not financial capital, but human capital.
As Corey points out, under neoliberalism, government is more focused on getting out of the way of businesses' ability to create massive wealth, and instead to train citizens to be efficient cogs in that machine, with the idea that they'll get to share in that wealth eventually, either via taxation or, maybe that wealth will magically trickle down.
So it's using the state to some degree, and it's using taxation and redistribution to some degree, but it's not using it in the sort of the way we associate with the New Deal and the Great Society. Instead, it's trying to, these sort of tinkering around the edges, beginning in the 60s, but really in the administration of Jimmy Carter. You see a similar move of dissatisfaction with the New Deal. People forget that Jimmy Carter was the first great deregulator. He deregulated most importantly, the transportation industries. He really started pushing back on a lot of the New Deal programs.
That's right. While many often associate neoliberalism with Ronald 666 Reagan on the right, and the Democrats adopting the ideology when Bill can't keep my dick in my pants Clinton said that
The era of big government is over.
Neoliberalism goes back even earlier, to the end of the civil rights era. I've talked before in this channel about how Richard Nixon created the catchphrase law and order to capture white backlash to the civil rights movement. In my video on, you're never gonna guess this, the video's on Law and Order, the TV show. Yeah, it's this kind of galaxy-brained dot connecting that has made me a mildly successful niche YouTuber. After conservative policies took hold on the back of racial tensions, Democrats finally won back the presidency in 1976 with the moderate Jimmy Carter, who explicitly rejected the idea that government could or should solve social problems.
Government cannot solve our problems. It can't set our goals. It cannot define our vision. Government cannot eliminate poverty or provide a bountiful economy or reduce inflation or save our cities or cure illiteracy or provide energy.
And as such, he set out to deregulate industry, to let business, in its majestic efficiency, handle our social problems. He did this in a bunch of different sectors, from railroads to trucking to communications, but he's probably most famous for deregulating the airline industry, which is a good case study to understand how this deregulation worked. To make a long story short, before Carter, airline travel was strictly regulated. This was for safety reasons, but it was also because you need a lot of public funding to build things, like commercial airports. Then in the late 70s, gas prices started skyrocketing, and airfare prices along with them.
By 1970, we imported 1/3 of our oil and gas, relying on others to meet new needs. Then in 1973, the big Middle East producers cut off oil shipments to major consuming countries. When the embargo was lifted, the price of foreign oil had jumped from $3 to $12 a barrel, 4 times higher than before.
In response, lawmakers, led by Robert Bork, a man so freaky even he couldn't get confirmed to the Supreme Court, began to argue for deregulation, saying it would lower prices for consumers and preserve those juicy, juicy profit margins. So, what's the problem? Everybody wins? Well, not everybody. That deregulation put added stress on airline workers who, for some strange and unknowable reason, didn't seem to get a share of those profits. I wonder why. When the Professional Air Traffic Controllers Organization went on strike 3 years later to try to get a piece of that pie, Reagan fired them all, marking a massive turning point for the American labor movement that it really hasn't recovered from. Throughout the 80s, the organized labor that had been the backbone of the Democratic Party and the major motivator for social and political change became withered by this onslaught of neoliberal policies. As history professor Lily Geismer wrote for Jacobin, in order to win elections, suburban knowledge professionals and high-tech corporations supplanted urban ethnics and labor unions as the party's core constituency. And with that shift in the party's base came a shift in values, with Democrats vowing to keep taxes low while expanding the generally non-unionized tech sector. in order to chase these suburban professionals. As Geismar concludes, a party without a working class core can't be expected to improve the prospects of the working class. This is definitely simplifying a pretty complex time in American history, but I think you can see this kind of shift from a party of the working class to one captured by elites on full display in the West Wing, which emerges directly from the same primordial goo. The West Wing embodies the neoliberal attitude towards business and labor, prioritizing corporate profits over whoever it is that the economy is supposed to be for.
But they're part-time employees.
And a lot of them aren't. A lot of the workers that management designated as part-time are de facto full-time employees who are working the same amount of hours under a different designation at lower wages with no health or pension.
I'm with management.
Imagine my surprise.
The younger workforce puts a premium on job flexibility, and they're unwilling to make long-term commitments to a single company. What do you expect?
Fair hiring practices.
There's a sort of reverence for the free markets in the West Wing that you'd expect to hear from some libertarian nerds. You know, right before their beloved free market fails to protect them from a bear attack.
The marketplace will take care of interests.
Free trade stops wars.
Look, I am for free trade. I'm for fair trade.
We're supposed to upend the marketplace on principle alone?
Yeah. You are supposed to upend the free market based on principle. How do you think we got laws banning child and slave labor? It wasn't because the free market dictated that they were unprofitable, I'll tell you that. In the West Wing, we can see our beloved liberals sell out labor and the working class through the debate over free trade.
Hey, I've got 15 AFL-CIO union reps who want to yell at me about us sending their jobs to China.
In the 90s, Democrats led the charge on a number of free trade agreements, allowing goods and services to flow across nation borders freely, with minimal taxation, tariffs, or regulation. This was a huge boon to multinational corporations, who could outsource their labor costs to countries with fewer worker protections and for lower wages.
As a result of NAFTA, those tariffs went down all the way to zero over 10 years. And that meant that it was much less appealing to do manufacturing of that good in the United States, and those jobs basically disappeared.
The West Wing dedicates a number of episodes to the debate over free trade, often portraying those who are opposed to it as backwards Neanderthals living in the past.
What are European farmers so upset about?
That they can't cling to a dying way of life, that free trade means that some of them may have to wear neckties, that they can't beat Pentium chips back into plowshares, take your pick.
In Season 5, Josh expresses some anxiety over the fact that their free trade policies are allowing a massive company to lay off 17,000 tech workers and replace them with cheaper labor in India, bypassing a union that literally helped get Bartlett elected. But when Josh brings this up, he's met with the same line given to women and black voters.
CWA is the reason we're in this room. And they would prefer a Republican who'd support free trade than gut job training and eviscerate unemployment insurance.
See, they'd be worse. Sure, we're losing jobs, but the line at the stock market goes up. Can't they see that this means the economy is good? You're just stuck in the past with your love of labor protections and living wages. Woo. At other times, the show was outright hostile to criticisms of free trade. In Season 2, Toby is tasked with meeting protesters against free trade, and the contempt he has for them is palpable, bordering on bloodlust.
Fire your gun.
I can't fire a warning shot indoors.
No, I mean fire at them. Just kidding.
The protesters are portrayed as unruly, unorganized, and unreasonable. People who simply don't understand how the world really works.
I'm the White House Communications Director and a Senior Domestic Policy Advisor to the President.
We need clean air more than free trade.
How many 12-year-olds made your shoes, Toby?
But the West Wing doesn't actually engage with the criticisms of free trade policy, whether that's outsourcing jobs or bypassing environmental regulations. I mean, here's all the episode had to say about their concerns.
They'd say the WTO benefits corporations and not people.
Does it?
Benefits both.
That's it. In another episode, when some Democratic congressmen voice concerns about some free trade policies, Toby blows them off basically the exact same way.
We're very concerned about the effect that the flow of cheaper goods into this country will have on American labor and American manufacturing. We're very concerned about the lack of environmental controls.
Concerns which are entirely reasonable.
You're concerned about American labor and manufacturing?
Yeah.
What kind of car do you drive?
Toyota.
Then shut up.
Besides its impact on American labor and manufacturing, the tax cuts that go with free trade create another problem, since taxes are how we pay for programs like Social Security. So, how does the Bartlett administration square their free trade policies with their desire to be seen as a big government that does big things? Well, by cutting Social Security, of course. Toby goes after Social Security on more than one occasion, arguing that it is headed towards inevitable financial doom.
The number of retirees is going to double. If we do nothing, the trust fund will go broke.
His solution? To find some compromise where Democrats cut Social Security benefits and raise the retirement age, which he justifies by arguing that it's better than destroying the program entirely.
Americans are retiring in their 60s, living until their 80s. FDR didn't intend to pay for 20 years of shuffleboard.
Tell that to the sheet metal worker whose tendons are shot by 55.
Having no Social Security works wonders on the tendons.
The idea that we have to cut welfare programs in order to save them is always portrayed as some inevitable force of nature that we can do nothing to change, only prepare for. And honestly, we should all be grateful for that, because don't you know, the Republicans would be way worse.
But we can't be sentimental about this, or we will have a Republican president who will gut education, he will auction off Social Security, and cut taxes till we're bleeding red ink.
Oh no, they'll auction off Social Security, like Toby did. These conversations about entitlement programs revolve almost entirely around cutting benefits and making these programs weaker, because they're running out of money. But the show talks far less about funding these programs with things like taxes. And when it does, like we saw in the beginning of this video, it doesn't really push back on the idea that taxes are unfair to the wealthy.
And to finance the tax deductibility of college tuition for the children of the box unloader and the school teacher, we go to a fourth group, the uber wealthy, and ask a CEO making $16,400,000 a year to give us another 1%.
I'm sorry, I said the doctor got into medical school. He had to work hard to do that, and presumably the CEO has some skills, the value of which the market has placed at $16,400,000.
Was there a spread on this in Republican Vogue?
Instead, the show insists that the best way to spread wealth is, drumroll please, through the free market.
Open markets redistribute wealth.
You see, open markets don't create wealth inequality, even though our open markets have objectively done that. They're actually more efficient at redistributing wealth than the government is. And if we aren't seeing that wealth trickle down, well, it's because we just haven't done enough to let industry do whatever they want. Today, many of the crises we face, from climate change to housing to healthcare, are products of wealth inequality that a neoliberal approach not only cannot solve, but actively helps create. But unfortunately, that reality hasn't exactly killed neoliberalism as an idea.
Ezra Klein, New York Times columnist, host of the podcast The Ezra Klein Show, also co-author of the new book, Abundance.
The book is Abundance. It is fantastic.
Abundance.
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 You may have heard of this abundance thing, either from the title of the New York Times best-selling book or from your annoying friend who listens to just way too many podcasts. So what is abundance?
So my simplest summary of abundance is it's an effort to focus people on the question of what do we need more of and what is stopping us from getting it.
We say that to have the future that liberals want, we need to find ways to build and invent more of what we need.
That's Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson, the authors of Abundance. In both the book and their lengthy media tour following its release, they've framed abundance as a response to bad Democratic leadership. That the Dems have failed to deliver on the big projects they've promised, things like a green energy grid, affordable housing, or better healthcare. Their book begins with a vision of their ideal tomorrow, describing the solar punk future on the cover, complete with low-orbit factories producing next-generation medication, electric self-driving cars, and more free time thanks to the productivity of AI. They envision a Democratic Party that gets stuff done.
The kind of abundance liberalism that we're pointing to, the kind of get shit done.
Like the Josh Shapiro version, right? His get shit done agenda.
Okay, abundance folks, I'll bite. How do we get there?
If you want to know why we didn't build California high-speed rail, if you want to know why it's so expensive to build affordable housing in a lot of liberal jurisdictions when you trigger public money, it is because of the regulations we put on government.
We need to think about deregulating government itself, getting the rules out of the way that keep government from achieving the democratic outcomes that it's trying to achieve. It's about zoning, it's about permitting, it's about environmental review, it's about the local defaults.
We're not building nearly enough because we've made it incredibly hard to do. So you need to deregulate.
Really? That's your solution? Deregulation? Did you not watch the last section of this video? The thing about Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan? Don't tell me you fell asleep. The abundance folks believe that the biggest issue for Democrats is that bureaucratic red tape gets in the way of them delivering on their stated goals. To achieve abundance, we have to remove the barriers of regulations around things like zoning and environmental review, things that they blame the left for. And I'm not putting words in their mouths. Here's them saying exactly that.
And we create all these ways, through the New Left, through the environmental movement, through a bunch of different pieces of legislation we do for individuals to throw themselves in front of the state, to sue it, to stop it, to delay it.
That's how you get an environmental revolution in the 1960s that solves the problem of clean or dirty air and dirty water, but leaves us with a set of norms like NEPA that make it impossible to add clean energy in our generation.
In this fucking maddening historical moment we're in, the problem becomes not that we're building too much, but we're building too little. And particularly building too little in the places where that new left was most powerful, California, New York, places like that.
To understand the abundance folks, I called up Henry Burke, a senior researcher at the Revolving Door Project.
We're a good governance, government watchdog type group. We are nonpartisan, and we're primarily concerned with the influence of major corporations, billionaires, oligarchs over the federal government, particularly in the executive branch.
Henry has done a ton of reporting on the movement that has sprouted up around abundance, tracing its roots through the billionaires who have lined up to fund it.
The thing that everybody should be aware of that is not in the conversation enough is that abundance was a thing before this book came out. The term is, I guess, kind of coined by Derek Thompson in early 2022, and then immediately a bunch of people leap on it. But basically, there is a wide coalition of groups that are involved pushing this idea of abundance. They don't always agree on everything, but they kind of agree on the same core principles that everything's about supply. It's about unleashing supply, unleashing private investment to solve America's woes, and that we need to pivot away from the ideas of redistribution and just focus on growth. And I think the kind of core idea of it is, look, the richest man in the world in the year 1800 lived a terrible life compared to you or I now, even if we're lower middle class. And so we've solved this by growth. We don't actually need to redistribute wealth. We just need to focus on future progress. And that's kind of the core idea of abundance as a movement.
Take the book's take on green energy projects, where they point to environmental regulations like the National Environmental Policy Act and the California Environmental Quality Act as the biggest barriers for building all the things that they want to build.
There are environmental rules like NEPA that I think make it harder for government to build housing and clean energy. I think that in states like California, there are rules like CEQA that make it almost impossible to fulfill the affordable housing needs that cities like Los Angeles and San Francisco have.
The main issue with this take is that it hasn't been grassroots leftist groups stopping these construction projects. It's been peopled with a moneyed interest in opposing them. Take, for example, that one of the biggest and most vocal opponents of California's high-speed rail was this guy named Elon Musk. Maybe you've heard of him, who announced his Hyperloop system as an explicit attempt to undermine support and funding for the project. Or look at how 85% of CEQA lawsuits are filed by organizations with no record of environmental advocacy. Or how, according to a report by Earth Justice in 2024, more than 70% of the nation's electricity is produced by investor-owned utilities that also own most of the nation's high-voltage transmission lines. They often own or are affiliated with existing fossil fuel power plants and do not have any incentive to expand transmission and erode their monopoly on generating power. None of this is discussed in the book Abundance. And in fact, when pressed on this, the authors repeatedly argue that corporate power can't be the reason for this problem, since, there's a lot of money on both sides of this issue.
There is money trying to build transmission lines. There is money trying to slow down the building of transmission lines. Just walking into this process and saying, where's the money, doesn't get you anywhere. Money is often on many different sides of a political fight, including climate change.
This is what we call in the biz, a lie. Officially, on OpenSecrets.org, oil and gas spent roughly 5 times as much as renewable energy in the 2024 elections. But as we all know, there's a ton of dark money at play here as well. Big Oil spent $445 million lobbying Trump and Congress. Fossil fuel companies spend heavily on massive disinformation campaigns and fund nonprofit organizations with the express purpose of slowing down the green energy transition while looking like environmental groups. This abundance conversation of oppressive environmental regulations is just completely divorced from reality. The Supreme Court literally just made it more difficult for environmental regulators to enforce the Clean Water Act, allowing billions of gallons of raw sewage to be pumped into the beaches, streets, and homes of San Francisco. They're pumping waste into homes, and these morons are like, it'd be better without regulations. Pretty hard to blame progressives for that one. While it is true that these projects are slowed down using environmental laws, these are levers being pulled by people who have something to gain financially from slowing down these projects. The issue is not regulation or environmental review. It's the imbalance of power, money, and resources. The same is true for their points about the housing crisis, where they see the main culprit as zoning laws.
We started seeing zoning regulations. We started seeing historic preservation rules. We started seeing laws that made it easier for citizens to sue to stop a new development from going up.
Houston doesn't have a zoning code. That's why it's easier to build there. I mean, I was talking to a developer there and he said, look, the thing everybody knows about Houston, if you're a developer, is it's a bad place to be a homeowner. It's a good place to be a developer.
Now look, I think that changing zoning laws would be good, and I think that it is necessary. But I'm not sure who, as a part of one of these leftist groups, is opposing them.
The other thing I would just like to say is abundance has very much been focused on attacking the left for some of these issues when there's no reason for it. Restrictive zoning is not a hobby horse. You know, AOC isn't getting out there and being like, I'm in the suburbs and I say single, 1 acre minimum lot sizes. Let's keep the country club estates the way they are. This is very much a thing the left is opposed, going back to like redlining.
For most Americans, their house is their most significant financial asset, and often is viewed as an investment. Beyond that, in the United States, for some godforsaken racist reasons, we've tied public school funding to property taxes. I mean, what's the first thing you hear when someone talks about a house they bought? My parents helped me with the down payment. Okay, fine. The second thing you hear, the schools are great. NIMBYs might live in blue districts or blue states, but they're inherently acting in a conservative way, trying to conserve the value of their investment. It's this commodification of housing that is the fundamental issue. And the fact that, as with so many commodities, housing has become increasingly captured by an ever-shrinking group of elites. A group you may call an oligarchy. Although, not if you listen to the abundance folks.
If government has progressive aims, and it can't accomplish them, you can't blame the oligarchy for that.
Except you kinda can? The National Bureau of Economic Research published a paper this year arguing that constrained housing supply is relatively unimportant in explaining differences in rising house prices. Johns Hopkins University released a report in 2023 arguing that housing has become so costly because of oligarchy, and that market concentration has led to less building and higher prices. And I don't have to look far to see examples of this. Hell, I can look out the window. In my city, Seattle, there are neighborhoods where as many as 70% of properties are managed by a small group of landlords, who then have used price-fixing software created by the company RealPage to drive up rents by as much as 30%. Seattle, along with other cities, have attempted to ban this kind of algorithmic pricing, although the largest measure, passed by the Colorado State Legislature, was vetoed by Governor Jared Polis, someone who has been described as a poster boy for the abundance movement.
Which Democratic politicians seem abundance-pilled or at least abundance-curious to you guys?
Jared Polis in Colorado.
So really, the abundance pitch boils down to this. Get rid of zoning requirements and cut environmental regulations, specifically NEPA and CEQA, and I guess that's kind of it. Fundamentally, the abundance folks believe in getting out of the way and letting businesses grow. But it's an argument that quickly dissolves when you're confronted with the reality of corporate influence in politics.
We could agree to every single zoning reform that you might want. But, Big Oil spent $150 million lobbying last year. Donald Trump is now in office and doing their bidding at a federal level. That's just undeniable, isn't it? You can't say that the climate change infrastructure problem in America is one of zoning and not Big Oil.
I would absolutely argue that an enormous part of the fact that American states cannot build clean energy is because it has become practically impossible to actually alter the physical environment. It's not that it doesn't exist. It's just not as important as financing, local permitting for projects, getting money, and being able to break ground.
Well, as you and I have just agreed, the
country.
financing now is being withdrawn by a Republican administration at the federal level.
Absolutely. Well, we have no debate there.
And that's big oil influencing them.
And yet, abundance has united centrist Democrats who want to punish the left with corporate billionaires seeking deregulation. I mean, look at this conversation from Welcome Fest, a political convention Henry calls Abundance Coachella, and watch just how quickly it explicitly becomes about crushing organized labor.
When I look at policies in New York that stand in the way of abundance, very often if you look under the hood, you eventually find a labor union at the end. Is there a way to have a pro-abundance Democratic Party agenda in New York without breaking the strong link that exists between the New York Democratic Party and the labor movement?
It's clear from lines of questioning like this that the party has been captured. Although it's not from the left, it's the same kind of wealthy donors the Dems ditched the working class for all those years ago. And you can see this when you look at Welcome Fest's donor list. They include billionaire Reid Hoffman, the co-founder of LinkedIn, who publicly demanded the firing of anti-monopoly queen Lena Khan, the heirs to the Walmart fortune, a corporation that has engaged in countless union-busting efforts while their full-time employees need to rely on government programs like Medicaid and food stamps to meet their basic human needs. We've also got a member of the Murdoch family, the evil geniuses behind Fox News, a political action committee founded by Joe Manchin's daughter with the sole goal of opposing filibuster reform, and just so many finance bros. Another convention, the Abundance 2024 conference, was funded by a similar bunch of ghouls, including a main branch of the Koch network, libertarian AI billionaire John Arnold, and the Niskanen Institute, a think tank that argues against providing assistance to any renters, and says that the main reason our healthcare is so expensive is because socialism. These are certainly the bold new ideas that the Democratic Party needs to embrace. Jesus fucking Christ. They never make the case for, like, raising taxes. Is that just because they don't think that that's possible? If I'm being charitable, like that's not a political reality? Or is it more like they think that that's too slow, or is it just because their corporate donors don't want them to talk about raising taxes?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely inclined towards the last one of those, that, you know, they don't want to upset the boat. But it's also like, it just doesn't really align with the supply side argument that, you know, it's all about building supply, because taxes are redistribution, and redistribution is a distraction from growth.
Welcome Fest at large was full of this kind of stuff. Reactionary policies aimed more at stamping down populism than delivering for voters, with ideas floated like opposing defunding the police, opposing electric vehicle mandates, opposing a right to shelter, and arguing that Democrats shouldn't fight Florida's Don't Say Gay bill. All 7 Democrats who spoke at Welcome Fest even went on to sign a resolution thanking ICE for protecting the homeland.
If you were an elected official who's really supportive of Harris in 2024, and she lost, and you're looking for a reason why and a path forward, I think Abundance kind of posits it, that it is progressives who are the reason why you lost, and here is the platform forward. And I think to a lot of elected officials who are not inclined to ally themselves with Bernie Sanders or AOC in any way, that's a compelling argument. Whether or not it's like based in fact, it is, yeah, it's a comforting blanket that they can kind of hide under and be like, I don't need to actually pivot left. I can keep the same direction. And there's a couple of quick fixes. You know, if we just got rid of environmental review, if we just got rid of restrictive zoning, everything in America would be solved. We don't need to fund things more. We don't need to engage in real politics. There are these kind of solutions that harm nobody, and we can do them.
This can help explain why so many of the Abundance folks and Democratic establishment have lined up to oppose Zohran Mamdani's candidacy in New York City. All of a sudden, those blue no matter who people are big mad that someone is proposing policies that challenge the grip party elites hold on the party with crazy ideas like rent relief and ending food deserts.
I think a lot of his ideas are bad. I think a lot of the ideas that he considers priorities are bad. I think a rent freeze would be a really bad idea.
While Abundance is championed by prominent liberal voices, the movement has a ton of fans who are considerably less liberal, like Trump's Secretary of the Interior and Sam Eagle lookalike, Doug Burgum. The resemblance is honestly uncanny. Hell, even our favorite alcoholic sexual predator turned Supreme Court Justice and noted enemy of the environment Brett Kavanaugh recently invoked the abundance mindset, arguing that under NEPA, fewer projects make it to the finish line, and that we need laws to get out of the way of construction rather than paralyze it.
You can understand why that worries your progressive critics. The Republicans have always wanted deregulation, and here are two prominent liberals seeming to make the case for them.
This idea of an efficient government is everywhere in the abundance movement.
We need to think about deregulating government itself, getting the rules out of the way that keep government from achieving the democratic outcomes that it's trying to achieve. This is a world in which a department of government efficiency is a godsend.
But the reason we have regulations, these bottlenecks of efficiency, is because the government is really powerful. Not only is it the only institution that can bring corporate power to heel, but the government has also abused its power in the past. We have regulations because we want there to be rules on that power. Every single regulation we have was fought for, sometimes for a ridiculously long period of time. I'm not saying that the government couldn't be more efficient, but they're not talking about the hours it takes us normies to fill out paperwork. And the more you remove those guardrails and streamline government, the further you drift from democracy and the closer you get to authoritarianism. I mean, there's a reason the guy who did the Nazi salute was pushing for government efficiency.
The number of people whose permission I need before I can do whatever the hell I want. Let me tell you something, there's really a lot to be said for fascism.
While abundance has polled not well at all among voters, it's been taking off with the Democratic establishment. From politicians like genocide apologist and incel Richie Torres, to MCU supervillain Gavin Newsom, to the pod save guys.
Before we get into it though, I should say I'm full-fledged abundance pilled. I'm in.
That's because abundance is being pitched explicitly as an alternative to the rising desire for more populist policies from blue voters.
Our book is trying to win a certain intra-left coalitional fight about defining the future of liberalism in the Democratic Party.
The abundance folks consistently deride criticisms of their movement from the left, calling them unrealistic in much the same way that the West Wing did.
Say you think I'm a neo-shitlip, and you just want the government to do the public housing. Great. I would like to see a lot more public housing too. The government cannot currently do public housing under the regulatory structure under which it operates. And yes, some of that is money. But it's also the fact that you can sue to stop all this stuff under the National Environmental Policy Act.
So why don't you make the case for socialized medicine then? Why do we not see any mention of Medicare for all in the book? That would be a way of dealing with scarcity. That would be a way of dealing with the huge inefficiencies in the US healthcare system.
I believe in a single-payer healthcare system. I think that'd be the best path forward. I also want to be politically realistic. I also want to be politically realistic.
Aren't you guys the ones who said that AI was going to give us a green future complete with shorter work weeks without losing our jobs or pay? But sure, I'm the unrealistic one. None of these ideas are new. We can literally see them enshrined for 25 years in the West Wing, whether it's an anti-labor, pro-growth stance of free trade, or painting the groups that they rely on for votes and who try to hold them accountable as just as cynical as they are, or the general dismissal of populism or delivering for working class people under the guise of being serious and realistic. These ideas didn't work before, and they won't work now. The era of American fascism and American oligarchy are officially here. All that's left is to resist. Now, we can either do that by fighting oligarchy, or we can help launder their message to Democratic voters. The choice is yours, but I know which one I'm choosing. So, that's the end of the Worst Wing, and I'm so happy. I'm so glad. Although, it seems like it will never fully leave us. I started this series with the idea of trying to better understand the arc of the Democratic Party and how we got to this place of complete ineptitude and cowardice. And I feel like we got there. The only downside was that I had to watch The West Wing this much. Sometimes it's a bit overwhelming to focus on media like this, media that tries to gaslight you into thinking that the status quo is good, actually.
You don't think it's a good tax?
It was in 1916, when this country's wealth was concentrated and we wanted to prevent the emergence of an aristocratic class.
That's why it's important to take time to remind ourselves that we're not the only people feeling this burnt out and overwhelmed by the state of the world. And while you're doing that, why not hang out with a show that more accurately represents the world around us while still giving you the dopamine hit you usually can only get from cartoons designed to get kids to spend their parents' money on toys, or gambling apps designed to get you to spend away your kids' money on sports? Instead of escaping into a show like The West Wing, where people are nice but completely divorced from reality and tell anyone bringing up that reality to shut the fuck up, why not check out Amy's Dead End Dreamhouse?
There is a place where all your dreams can come true.
Oh, hi. I'm Amy, and this is my dream house.
But this
All right, did we get that?
Yep, we got it. Is not that place.
Oh, thank because I actually have to start work in 3, 2, 1!
Amy's Dead End Dreamhouse is a new series from creator Maggie Mayfish that follows Amy and her apartment full of appliances as they encounter all kinds of adult problems. From mental illness to job hunting to impossible beauty standards to your guy friends getting red-pilled. Turns out, life can't really be solved in under 20 minutes, even with commercial breaks. I was lucky enough to check out the pilot episode early, and I loved the tone it struck between the nostalgia we all get while watching the kids' shows of our childhood, combined with a clear-eyed vision of the world that kicked our asses the second we grew up. A show that tries to find hope and humanity without trying to gaslight you. You can stream Amy's Dead End Dreamhouse exclusively on Nebula, which is a streaming service owned and operated collectively by us creators. It has a ton of exclusive content on it, from FD Signifier's interviews with white and white-passing people to Broey Deschanel's exploration of taboo scenes in film, like cannibalism and obscenity. Nebula is becoming the answer to the question, how do you make art and content that is as high quality and interesting as traditional media without the corruption and exploitation associated with that industry? Seriously, it's really easy to lose yourself browsing through what is Netflix for video essays. And with my link below, it comes out to just $3 a month. I think most of us spend more for a single cup of coffee, and Nebula won't make you shake with uncontrollable anxiety. Although my videos will. My videos on Nebula might. I don't know. Go to nebula.tv/skipintro to get your subscription started today. $3 a month. No, yeah. Click it. Do it. Woo! Yeah! Woo! And if you're still here, thank you so much for watching. Share, like, subscribe. You can support the channel on Patreon. On Patreon, you get ad-free, full versions, uncut of these videos. Sometimes I gotta cut stuff out for copyright or just for brevity, but sometimes they're interesting tangents. I don't know, it's up to you. You can also check out my interviews with Corey Robin and Henry Burke, as well as the one from earlier in this series with Emily St. James. We have also got ones going back through the propaganda years. They're good. They're really interesting, I think. One of my favorite parts of this job. I also do monthly mailbags and roundups where I talk about the different TV shows that I watched and people ask me questions and I answer them. We also do Little Skippies, which are shorter video essays that are kind of unscripted, off the cuff. Did one about 28 years later, did one about Zohran Mamdani. Also have debrief videos. The debrief video for the first 2 West Wing episodes was like an hour plus. I still have so much to say specifically about abundance, so that'll be in the debrief for this video. And we also do live streams. Did some live streams of the West Wing, which are on, you can rewatch them, obviously. And we might start doing some Generation Kill stuff because people were really interested in the War on Terror stuff. So yeah, patreon.com/skipintro. It is the best way to help the channel. And talk to you again later. Bye.